Okay.
Reflected over here.
You want that? Because I don't need it. Don't have anything. Okay, ready? Okay, everybody, we're gonna go ahead and get started. Small group tonight, but that's cool. That works, like Rick said, small or large, it's still information that we can all enjoy. So I'm Pam Barber, chapter president. Happy to see you folks here. Just a few little things. If you need to use the restroom, there are restrooms up by the main desk, but also right around the corner here from our room. You just go around this corner and it's right there is where we can also use those. And please help yourself to the refreshments while we're here. Pretty simple stuff, but still it's nice to have something to munch on. Got a few announcements. One is our speaker had to cancel today, unfortunately. So Rick has been wonderful to fill in. So that'll be coming up here shortly. I also wanted to announce, you probably, if you've read the newsletter, you see we have a new publicity chair. His name is Jesse Freeman. He helped us out last fall as being part of the hospitality team. And what do you know? He's now a chairperson on the board. So be careful what you volunteer for. But anyway, he's working out great. He's working really hard at transitioning, and I think he's actually there. The newsletter that just went out was a lot of his work, so looking good there. January 20th, we've got the Silver Step Falls field trip or hike. That's the Saturday, and actually it's full, and they've got a wait list. So I think that's a lesson. And if you want to do something with these field trips that you see pop up, you better get on it quick because they're filling up fast anymore, especially with the limits we have. We don't necessarily set those limits. They're usually set by the state park or the preserves or whoever owns the property to keep us from overusing these particular wonderful spots that we find. On the 22nd, Rick's going to be doing a talk at the Pickens Library about natives versus invasives. So if your piqued interest is on those subjects, you might want to go. I'm sure it's a pretty good talk for sure. And that starts at 5:30 at the Pickens Library in Liberty. February 10th is our February field trip. And, oh no, that's the 24th, is the Brasstown Falls field trip. So I think registrations are open for that. So if you'd like to attend, just hit the website and look for activities and go to our calendar, and you'll see that on that particular date where you can sign up to actually go on that field trip. But February 10th was something that was moved from the 20th because of the weather. We need folks to sign up to help plant trees. So if that's your passion, they've been doing a lot of work on the Middle Saluda River, trying to stop erosion and control some of the invasives and things that are happening there. And they put in a ton of rocks and what I call riprap around the shorelines of the river in that area. And they're also planting, I don't remember how many trees. I think last fall they did like 300 trees on one section. And they got a lot of volunteers to help make that happen in a day or two. And so they've rescheduled this for February 10th. And it's Trees Upstate that's doing this. So if you just go to treesupstate.com, you'll find a place where you can register to help them out with that. So that's about all I've got for announcements. Don't be shy. Most of you probably know Rick, but I'm gonna let Heather take over now. She is our program chair. If you've not met Heather, she does an awesome job at putting all these things together for us. So enjoy your evening.
I'm Heather. And I'll be introducing Rick. Many of you probably already know Rick. He's one of the co-founders of the South Carolina Native Plant Society, and he's going to be giving a talk about pollinators, which I'm really excited to hear about this. Unfortunately, Johnny couldn't be here with us, but thanks so much, Rick, for stepping in to offer the programming. And so he's been a longtime advocate of land ethic values and education, and you're chair of the advocacy committee at the South Carolina Native Plant Society. So he does so much to help us just conserve our lands here in the upstate and around the region. I think you can maybe share a little bit more too about the recent the water buffer. That was like really exciting to hear about. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Rick. I'm gonna fix these Zoom controls really quick just so that they're out of your way and should be good to go.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much, Heather. And Pam, great introduction there on announcements. Uh, great to fill in. Thanks, great to be here. Most people know me, so I'm excited. Always my favorite folks is the Native Plant Society. So any chance I get to speak, it's always wonderful. And again, thank you all for being here, and thank you all for being here online as well. It's awful cold outside, and the weather's been pretty nasty. But just to follow up a little bit with what Heather was talking about, maybe most of you know, and some don't know, the Native Plant Society is a strong advocate for clean water, open spaces, etc. And something we've been working on with our coalition partners for a long time here in the upstate, particularly in Greenville County, is riparian buffers. And we have pushed this and pushed this. I've been working on it for 20 years. For the last 8 years, our coalition has worked to really push this across the finish line. And so, January 2nd, first day, county council came back. They, on the third reading, they passed the buffer ordinance that went with unified land development ordinance. So we were so excited to get that across. It is a really monumental achievement, and it will mean a lot for clean water in Greenville County. And I think it's going to serve as a model for other counties. We're already getting calls from Cherokee County, Anderson County, and other counties saying, wow, how can we get on board with this and come talk to us about it? So there's a lot of excitement around that. We had a big celebrate dinner this past week, celebrating all of our hard work on that. And I think all of us in conservation should really be grateful for that getting passed and all the hard work that so many people did for that. As Heather mentioned, I'm the advocacy chair for the state, and so we're always constantly working on some sort of issues out there that impact native plants, but also over the larger scale of our environment. So I'll kind of start talking about that. I could probably spend the whole program just talking about that. And because I understand, as I was missing in December, that the presentation was made on some of the stuff that I'm involved in. The talk I want to give tonight, you see the title on there, it's a bug's world. So, we always think about native plants and we just love our native plants, but really it's really a bug's world, and bugs really dictate what happens everywhere. And bugs are part of what we call ecosystem services, and the native plants and all these things just all kind of work together. So, this presentation, I put it together about a year or so ago and gave it to the Master Gardeners conference up here in Greenville, but I just didn't like where it went. So I worked on it and I gave it again a few months ago up in Tryon, and I think it's improved a lot. So I think you'll all enjoy this presentation about It's a Bug's World. So when you think about plants, you have to start thinking about the bugs. Doug Talamay's book, Bringing Nature Home, kind of lit the fire under native plants by speaking to the bugs and the insects and how all those things work together. So let's just get started here and let's dive in and let's just start the program here. So.
There's always something I forget.
Okay. All right. Good. Thank you. Okay. So if I can see here. So one of the things we want to talk about here starting is ecosystem services. And this is a term not many people have actually heard about or know really what it means. And those of us that's been in the conservation world or the design world, we kind of understand it, but the general public really hadn't really heard this term, ecosystem services. And so what this is really about is what does the ecosystem give us, provide for us that we don't have to pay for? And when you're out starting to really think about it, it gives us pretty much everything. Ecosystems give us everything, and they provide these services. So regulating services such as climate, water, disease, as well as pollination, which we're going to talk a lot about, supporting services such as soil formation and nutrient cycling, big part of that. And then cultural services such as education, aesthetics, the cultural and heritage values are strong as well, and it's recreation and tourism. So again, when we think about the environment and the whole system, think about it as a system. Too often we think about a plant or this plant or that. Oh, I just love that plant. But understanding these plants that they're part of an ecosystem and being part of that ecosystem, they provide services. They might not be services you know, or you can see, or you can feel or taste, but they're providing these services out there 24/7, 365 days a year. Pretty cool stuff. So it revolves around what we call biodiversity. Here's another word that you hear a lot about, biodiversity. But I like to ask people, do you know biodiversity when you see it? Can you touch it? Can you feel it? Can you identify it? Is it one thing, or is it many things, or little things, or is it big things? So really, it's all the above. So if you had a multiple choice answer, there it is. It's all of the above. But it's all really about plants, and plants are the driver of what we call biodiversity and that ecosystem services. It converts sunlight to food, provides our oxygen. We have to breathe. We need oxygen. Again, they're one of those ecosystem services that nature gives us that we don't have to pay for. We don't have to think about it, but there it is. It mitigates our weather effects. Again, climate and weather, you hear a lot about those things today, but again, understanding how all these things work together to provide biodiversity and our ecosystem. And in what our talk's not, it's a bug's world, insects are the stealth drivers of all of it. And then we've all co-evolved, and for millions of years, the plants and the insects, the birds, and all these things have co-evolved over millions of years and form what we call biodiversity. And it does it through food chains and food webs. And so I like to think about everything of a trophic level, food chain. There's a food chain in the soil. There's a food chain in the water. So we think about these things as these food chains that we can't see, we can't touch them, but they're all the things that work together to make biodiversity work. It helps with disease control, and agriculture depends on this biodiversity constantly. And one of the good things that's happening with our agriculture now is that farmers and agricultural people are beginning to realize that they need these services. We can't chemical our way into food production. We have to rely on this biodiversity to help with our agriculture. And so now the big movement is, organic farms and these type of things. They depend wholly on these services. They're not throwing the chemicals out there. They're not throwing the fertilizers out there. So when you talk about organic farming, here you go. It's all tied to what we're talking about tonight. And this photo that you see there, this photograph, I think is an epitome of biodiversity. I ride by this road, this spot on 183 between Pickens and Greenville every day. And most people drive by this, they don't see anything, but I see it all. And so I know when to look, I know what to see. And when they don't mow it too soon, this is what we get. So insects, the stealth driver, it's a bug's world. Why should we care? So, when you start thinking about, okay, 75% of our plants are pollinated by pollinators. 1 in every 3 bites that we take of our food requires a pollinator. So again, ecosystem services all the way through this. And when you think about what are we losing when we talk about biodiversity and the way we do things, only 3 to 5% of the land in the lower 48 is left undisturbed. And so that's kind of telling. And then the corporate agriculture, we've been talking about, these farms cover more than 50% of the nation. And then when you back that up with 40 million acres of neighborhoods and lawns, you go, okay. And you think about what we're going to be going towards here, we have to pay attention and we have to know what this stuff is. And when we think about landscape and landscape ecology, and you got 40 million acres of backyards, I think if we could convert 1% of that, I think we could solve a lot of our pollinator problems by doing better love in our landscapes. Excuse me. So this slide here, I love this graphic on here. Pollinators and agriculture are a partnership on our land. And whether you're a farmer or not a farmer, or you're just a homeowner that has these beautiful, wonderful plants in your yard, and you want to support pollinators, the principles are still the same. So here you can see how the food web, like I was talking about, works in any ecosystem that you walk through. Most people walk through any space and they don't see anything, and they don't know what's going on behind the scenes that they need to know, and how these drivers make all this work. And to say that it's a partnership on the land, it is a partnership, but it's not just a partnership between the land and us. It's a broader sense of partnership that we all can share. So these benefits of insects, and again, it's a bugs world. So all the things that they do for us, they provide the pollination, bees and bugs. They help recycle nutrients, decompose plant and animal waste, contribute to soil quality by churning and aerating soil particles. They attack our crop pests, like you can see in the slide photo here, attacking aphids. And then they're food for fish and songbirds and other wildlife. So again, that cycle of life keeps coming back to us. You think about systems and cycles. Here you can see, get an understanding how this system and this cycle works for us. So when I give a lot of talks sometimes, teach classes and this stuff, you know, what is a pollinator? What is pollination? How does it work on a plant basis? So these two slides right here, left and right, kind of give you a broad overview of how flowers and pollination works. And so here you can see on the slide to the right, you have what in the center there, you have a stigma that goes down to an ovary. The little the anthers are off to the right there, those little broad things there to the right. And they're your male parts. So you have your male and female parts there. And then you have your pollen grains, which come from the male part and are picked up by the pollinator and transferred over to the stigma. And then it grows down the tube and forms a seed and produces another plant. So that's kind of a short version of how that pollinator cycle works. And so it's really cool in the many shapes of colors and different sizes of flowers. It's always interesting. This is a simplified version, but it all works the same way. And so one of the things when we talk about natives versus non-natives, it often comes back to the benefits for those things, whether one plant's more beneficial than another. It comes back to a lot about how the flower is shaped. And the insects are really kind of lazy, and they want things easy and out front so they can get to the pollen and get to the what their reward is pretty quickly. So that's kind of a pollination in a nutshell, or the anatomy of inflorescence. So pollinators. So we think about these pollinators, you know, they have specific needs that nature provides for them as part of those ecosystem services that provides for them as well. So one of the things that pollinators need mostly is host plants. They need plants where they can raise their young and lay their eggs on just like anything else. And so they have to have the same basic requirements as any other biological creature on our planet. So they need host plants. And so one of the big pushes about monarchs these days is to push toward butterfly weed, because we've learned that that is a host plant for the monarch butterflies. But there's host plants, the other host plants for all sorts of native insects out there that they're all, some of them very specific and some of them are very general, but they serve as host plants. And so very key to understand when you're looking to put native plants in your yard and you say, well, I want to put things that support pollinators. Don't just think about the flower and the nectar source, but also think about how that plant is going to help these insects reproduce and carry their progeny on. So the other big thing that these pollinators do is provide food in the form of nectar. And again, the pollen sometimes is eaten as food, but sometimes just distributed. And then also provide, again, a larval food source so that when their eggs do hatch out, they have something to eat on. And and that happens a lot with oak trees. We know that oaks is one of our largest sources for a variety of insects on more than any other plant. And it's really because that has a lot of larval food for those insects. And they need nesting sites. So in nesting sites, it's not just, you know, they're above ground as well as nesting cavities and places to overwinter. So they need these places so that they can hide and do their business without being disturbed. And there's all sorts of mechanisms that go into this. And one of the things I like to talk about sometimes, I like to be out in the woods, I'm showing people, is about all our hickory trees. And hickory trees is a good example. So when you're walking through the woods in the fall of the year, you see all these small little hickory branches, maybe about 6 inches, 8 inches long, and they're all broken off just like they've been sawed by a handsaw. But there's a little insect called twig girdler, and it goes out and gnaws that branch, not all the way through. And then that branch falls to the ground in the winter. The insect passes out, hides in the leaf, and then climbs back to the tree and does it all over again. So it's all a big cycle. And when you know what and where and how to look for certain things, when you do your walks, you can see these things, and it really is cool. I love to talk about twig girdlers. So, and all the kids I entertain, they love to talk about it too. So, and then lastly, but not least, is water, and not just water, but clean water and abundant water. And this is why, you know, we in the Native Plant Society, we work for a lot for native plants, but we also work for clean water. But you can't separate the two things out. And so as I was working on some water issues in the past, somebody said, I thought we was the Native Plant Society. Well, we are the Native Plant Society, but you can't separate one thing out from the ecosystem without touching the other. So we work on all of it, and or I work on all of it. And these wonderful pictures I've got here, they're just, I thought that these are some of the best ones I've been able to accumulate. So what makes a good pollinator? What makes it, first of all, is insects have to be highly mobile. The ones that are most mobile can get around. The ones that can't get around, they're not the best pollinators. So being highly mobile is one of the characteristics. And again, another thing is they're hairy or scaly or have feathers. The more of these type of appendices that they have, the more pollen can stick to them. So they need the pollen to be able to carry that pollen on their head or their anthers or those type of things. So again, being kind of hairy and fuzzy and scaly, those type of things are good pollinators. And we might not like to look at them, it might kind of scare us the bejesus out of us. Oh my God. Because when we talk about insects, everybody wants to freak out a little bit, but no, that's just good stuff. So, and so they're adapted to feeding on flowers and pollen, nectar, and again, retrieving that pollen that we just showed you earlier. And many have specialized feeding structures like proboscis and other type of things where they can get to the nectar source because that's the way they're made. And then a good pollinator visits a limited number of plant species. Some of these insects are specialists. They're only going to go for 1 or 2 plants in their range. They're not going to go over 50 different plants or 100 different plants. They're going to go after 1 or 2 plants. Like the monarch butterfly, for example, it may feed on a lot of different plants, but it's only going to lay its eggs on monarchs, on butterfly weed. So again, they visit a limited number of plant species. So what causes bee and pollinator decline? Well, number one is loss of habitat and fragmentation. And we all can look around and we can see what's happening to natural spaces and natural areas. If we begin to grow and development, we're destroying their habitat on a mass grading scale. So habitat loss and fragmentation is probably the number one contributor to pollinator and bee decline. Next is invasive species, and it's not invasive species as far as plants go that much, but other types of insects or birds from other countries or something that again pose a big, can outcompete the insects that are native here. Pesticide pollution is also a big problem. The neonicotinoids are the culprit in a lot of our insecticides and fungicides that we put out there. And these neonicotinoids are really the root of the problem as far as what is hurting our pollinators. So we need to reduce our pesticide and fungicide use, or at least look at the label and make sure, you know, you can see what they have listed on there to avoid those neonicotinoids. And then diseases or other type things, or again, the things that can affect these pollinators, and then parasites. So go back to this these invasive species and these parasites. What another thing that's been taking our pollinator or honeybees out is a tracheal mite. It's a little small mite that gets in the throat of the honeybees and cuts off their windpipe, and they can't breathe. That's an invasive species. It came here. and now it's infested our honeybees and it's causing some huge problems. So it's both a parasite as well as an invasive species. So there's a lot going on with that. There's a lot of research going on with that. And so just be aware that this is some of the reasons that our pollinators are in decline. So when we think about our pollinators and bees are in trouble, there's a disturbing evidence that pollinating animals have suffered loss to the habitat. We just mentioned chemical misuse. We talked about that. But and so when we think about this, many of our pollinators are federally listed species, meaning that there's evidence that their disappearance in natural areas will cause distinct and long-lasting harm to that system we talked about, ecosystem services. Thank you. So one of the things here, next on the list here, is in the US, we've lost 50% of our managed honeybee colonies in the last 10 years. And that's an estimate. I would say that's probably more than that. We always tend to underestimate things. But I just, that's a huge number. But, you talk about honeybees, but it's not just the honeybees, it's insects in general. How much insect loss we've had. I can remember back when I was a kid, you had to stop 3 or 4 times or killing off your windshield. You don't have to do that anymore. There's no bug meat on your windshield. But again, just look around and you can see what I'm talking about. And then again, the lack of research has hindered our knowledge about the status of pollinators. And, and the European Union has been so concerned that they've invested 20 million in just studying this in Europe. And again, how much are we investing? 0. And we're not investing hardly anything. So Wormslow, Georgia, they've been a research station down there. Some friends of mine down there works there. And their funding is constantly being challenged. So what can you do to promote and protect pollinators? Of course, first on the list is cultivate native plants. That's why we're here, isn't it? We're here talking about native plants. But especially those that provide the nectar and the larval food source for these pollinators. And so that's top of the list. Install houses for bats and native bees. Supply salt or mineral licks for butterflies and water for all wildlife. And my projects, I've always have these little puddles I like to create. I call them mineral licks out there for the pollinators. And a lot of our clients and customers over the years, they really don't even know that we've even done it. We don't even tell them, we just do it, and so it's not one of the, I don't want to think people are attracting wrong sort of folks, things to their property, but we just do it. But then again, reduce our pesticide use, substitute flower beds for lawns. The lawns are a desert for pollinators. There's no redeeming qualities out there for pollinators. And then talk about that ecosystem services that we mentioned first of all, there's no ecosystem services there. You're going in the opposite direction with the lawns. I like to tell people you can have your lawn. We just need to shrink it down a little bit and understand that you might have a few weeds in it and it's still okay. But again, diversity is the key for what we can do, create a diverse eco landscape. And instead of having a pollinator garden, maybe your whole landscape should be a pollinator garden. Once years ago, I was first starting my business and doing pollinator gardens and stuff. And I said, the whole ecosystem, the whole landscape needs to be a pollinator garden, not a pollinator garden. I wasn't quite sure why I thought that, other than some good common sense. But then my friend that married down in Wormslow, Georgia, she said they've been doing research trials. And all the pollinator gardens, when they create these pollinators, all their enemies of our pollinators, they hang out by the pollinator garden because they got a target on their back. So you've really baited our pollinators to coming into the pollinator garden where all of its enemies and all of its detractors can be hanging out waiting for dinner to be served. And so just think about that. Maybe your whole ecosystem should be a pollinator garden. So let's meet these pollinators. Who are they? And what do they look like? And could you point to them if you saw one? I think you could. We got a pretty good crowd here. But birds, bats, insects, bees, butterflies, moths, flies, beetles, wasps, ants. You think about it. I think we're pollinators as well. We've got pollen, we carry it somewhere else, so about anything can be a pollinator. Well, let's just meet these guys up close and see what they look like. So let's meet the bees. I love that photo. I mean, that's just the bees. I mean, that's up close and personal right there. Notice how hairy that bee is. Notice how everything about it is made to hold on to and carry that pollen from point A to point B. A lot of times we see these little guys, floating around, but we have really, until you see one at this scale, you really don't know what they do look like, but when you see them up close, you go, oh, wow, that's a cool creature. And so the bees are often what we think about when we think about pollinators. We think about bees and butterflies first. And so here you can see them doing their job. And so this upper left, on the sunflower there, the green-headed coneflower, you can see, again, what do all these flowers have in common? They're all very open flowers. The structure, the morphology of this flower is very open. It's easy for those bees to get to the pollen and get to the nectar, what you're after. So again, open flowers, morphologically have a really distinct advantage of getting pollinated. And so a lot of your Asteraceae family of plants and those type of things, coneflowers, all this open structure. And then and I get often about, well, what about these cultivars of these natives? And I've given a talk on this, did some research on this. The native cultivars of natives, they function equally as well with pollinators unless they're just too weird. They get too far away from the original color or the flower structure is too complex, like these double flowering coneflowers. They're really hard for the pollinators to get to it. And so they're lazy. They want to go to the one they can get to the easiest. And so other than that, they generally work and function the same way. And so I love these slides, these nice photos here, again, of the bees doing their work on different types of plants here, like penstemon in there, the smallia on the right. But again, you can see how they operate. They love these open type flowers where they can get to things easy. And then next is our Lepidopterus. Lepidoptera is just the term for moths and butterflies. They both belong to that family there. And again, we all love the butterflies and moths. Everybody wants to create these pollinator or butterfly gardens. And so we all love these, love seeing them. And there's a distinct way of, when you see this photo here, the middle photo on the bottom there, is that a moth or a butterfly? Well, you can tell by looking at the antenna. When the antenna has a little swollen bead at the end of the antenna, it's a moth. If it doesn't, it's a butterfly. Okay, so you can identify whether it's a moth or a butterfly quickly. But again, all these guys do their things, and again, they're part of that our ecosystem services and diversity that we've been talking about. And so their life cycle is a little bit different here. So here you can see the monarch butterfly life cycle here from, the Asclepias tuberosa. Here you can see the insect caterpillar crawling around on the butterfly weed there, lays its eggs, it hatches out, goes to some instars. Sorry to include all that in here, but I thought I'd just go over that. But again, you can see all the butterflies on that butterfly weed there, and the slide to the right, where the butterflies have gone home to Mexico, and this is their home range tree that they have to fly to Mexico every year and go down there and do their life cycle all over again. So here you can see kind of the whole life cycle of monarch butterflies. But again, not to dismiss the moths. Moths, there's 5 to 1 moth for every butterfly species. So we have a lot more moths than we do butterflies, but they're mostly at night. So you can't see them working, but they're out there working and they're doing the job for us. And so again, the moths are really special. My family, we've got a little moth thing where we ever get out on the deck and set a light under a sheet and we can watch the moths come in and we can identify them. And it's a really cool trick to spend time with your kids or just do it yourself. It's a lot of fun. So next is bats and birds. People don't think about bats being pollinators, but they are. A lot of our plants are not flowering. like our Rocky Shoals spider lily. You know, you go back to, just go back to that one slide here, that Luna moth, the Rocky Shoals spider lily, they're pollinated by Luna moths. And then they're doing their work at night. And I've seen it in action. So again, it's really pretty cool stuff when you start to look at it. But the bats are really, really cool. We've set up bat houses at our house. We love the bats. And hummingbirds, we know, are great pollinators because of the way they feed and their nature and how they operate as well. So they're really good stuff. So we've met the bees, we've met the pollinators, we've talked about the biodiversity, we've talked about why mostly. Let's talk about why native plants. So native plants, insects, birds, and pollinators have co-evolved for hundreds of millions of years, just period. So this is a kind of co-evolutionary thing here. And so we don't have to think about it. It just happens, okay? It's one of those services we don't have to think about. But native plants provide the food and the shelter and hosting and nesting. When we ask ourselves, what do they need? Well, here you go. Native plants are providing their need. And the native plants, as far as the reducing our pesticide and other type things, they require less fertilizer and less chemicals. There we go again. Native plant servicing our pollinators. And then native plants bring nature home. And I'd like to give Doug Talamay's book another plug. If you haven't read that book, Bringing Nature Home by Dr. Doug Talamay, you should read it. It's written from an insect perspective, and again, he does a great job of understanding, from a home landscape perspective, what our role is in this, the human role. We've talked about all these other roles, but what is our role? Okay. And our role is to bring nature home. Okay. Let's bring it home. And then lastly, native plants create a sense of place. If you woke up and you looked out your window and all you could see was crepe myrtles, carissa hollies, and these type of things, you could be anywhere on the planet. But when you wake up and you look out and you see dogwood, you see serviceberry, you see our wonderful native plants out there, you're home in South Carolina, in the Piedmont. Our native plants define us as people and our place. And then lastly, the land ethic values. When we think about ethics, we have ethics for everything, including eating hot dogs, but what do we have where's our ethics for the land as it is rather than what it can be? And so we have to really cultivate what I call land ethic values so that the next generation that comes behind us has the same opportunity that we have to see the same things and share the same things and learn about the same things. So again, land ethic values are a key part of what we think about when we think about why native plants. So native plants are, you think about, I mentioned a couple of things about not just thinking about the individuals of plants, but thinking like a plant community. And as long as I've been doing landscape design for 30 years, I've always thought that plant community design was the way to go. Not loading up a bunch of individual plants and shoot them at a house and hope they land where they're supposed to go. Every place is an ecosystem. Every yard, every landscape is a plant community wannabe. Sun, shade, wet or dry, that's how it breaks down. So you think about your whole landscape as a plant community rather than individuals, then it becomes easier to manage. You get more biodiversity in there and you get longer flowering time for your landscape. Your landscape starts in February and flowers all the way to Christmas. But a landscape is a plant community is a natural community that is an interactive assemblage of organisms that play their physical environment and the natural processes that affect it. This is what we call plant community thinking. And so, and I think plant community design is the way to go. So let's look at some of the plants that we like a lot, that we think serve well, our pollinators and bee friendly and trees and shrubs. The first slide here on the left is Cercis canadensis, which is a redbud tree. And I just love this tree. It's a small tree, first thing to flower in the spring. One of the first trees to flower in the spring, and you can see the bumblebee going after it. But another plant that attracts moths at night. So you got to go out and check it out, your red bud at night, and see the moths out there doing the work on it. And then the top right is Acer rubra. I spoke at the state beekeepers a couple years ago, and every one of those beekeepers came up to me and said, "I'm planting more red maple." And I said, "Why red maple?" Well, red maple is the very first tree to flower. When it was still winter, and red maple is going to come out and provide that drink, or that food source, that early nectar source that they need so desperately. Red maple is one of that ecosystem services, the right plant at the right time, doing the right thing. And so most people, oh, it's just red maple. Well, you don't, but you have to understand the role of red maple. What role does it play in the ecosystem? Nothing, everything plays a role. And when you learn that, you're able to plan your landscape accordingly. And then lastly, but not leastly, is Chilonanthus virginicus, the French tree down there. I just love that tree. But you can see the great, beautiful flowers on it. And again, when you see it in flower, it is just covered with pollinators. I mean, and so it's a great, again, early spring source there. Some of our other shrubs that I like a lot here is American beautyberry, one of our common natives out there. And then the Itea virginicus, which is in the middle, and then the summer sweet clethra, which is on the right there. All these plants serve great for the pollinators. They're great, have great flowers and great fruits, and there to provide some color. But these three shrubs right here are just a small sample of the many shrubs that we have that can help these pollinators out, but also provide fragrance and beauty within your landscape various times of year. And here's another one of my favorite is buttonbush. I mean, this plant right here is a magnet for pollinators, bumblebees, all sorts of things. It's just it's a lots of near water, but it can live in a more drier landscape, but it'll stay much smaller. But I love buttonbush, and then of course pawpaw trees. We love the pawpaw festival that one of our members, Ryan Merck, has started up, and we really love doing that. But again, Simeon triloba, pawpaws are another great pawpaw pollinator source for our insects. Some of our native shrubs, our native azaleas, also great for pollinators as well, both as a host plant as well as a nectar source for the pollinators. And I just can't say enough with the viburnum there. I got Arrowwood viburnum on the right, but there's probably 6 or 8, 10 species of viburnums. All the viburnums are great pollinators. When I show you one species particularly, like of azaleas or viburnums, just know that all those plants in that genus are all going to do the same thing and provide the insects the values that they need for their life cycle. But all the viburnums are really, really great. And I've got 6 species of viburnums in my landscape. And then the vines. Well, the vines just do such a great job for the birds as well as all the pollinators, and again, these are just a couple here. The Bignonia caprylata, crossvine, and then of course the coral honeysuckle there. This is just a couple of our vines that do a great job. Virginia creeper is another one that is just a host plant as well as a nectar source as well. But all these vines do a great job. And I think any pollinator garden or pollinator landscape needs to have vines. You need to provide trellises and vines for your to help complete the cycle. Some of our more native perennials in here. I have a hard time whittling things down because I could probably show 200 slides up here of plants. But the Baptisia on the left there, the false indigo, again, you think about when these things flower also, that's a late spring, early summer flower. So again, when the things are heating up, it provides a great source, both again as a host plant as well as a larva source. I've already mentioned butterfly weed, goldenrods. Our goldenrods are some of the most underappreciated native landscape plants out there. I can't say enough good things about goldenrod. Everybody, I've shown the big screen, put them on the big screen, and somebody will sneeze and think it's something that's gonna make you sneeze. Oh, I can't have that. Well, it's not that amazing. There's a couple other plants I can tell you that's doing that, but it's not goldenrod. And but goldenrod, do not skip the goldenrod. They're out there in the trade. They're wonderful. And you can do a lot of good things with the goldenrods as part of your landscape ecology. Leatris is another, gay feather is another one that's just, again, off the chain when it comes to attracting butterflies and pollinators. I go up to the parkway often, and the Leatris up there is just, they fight over it. They fight over it. And then the ironweed is another one that's a late summer come on, like with Joe Pye weed. And again, just a pollinator magnet. Some of the other ones that we got here are the penstemon, which is called beard's tongue. And again, think about when it flowers throughout the summer. It'll flower off and on all summer. Again, great for your butterflies, great for your hummingbirds. And I really love that plant. There's several species out in the trade for that. Dark Towers is a real pretty one I like a lot, but they all do provide those ecosystem services. The blue-eyed grass, everybody has blue-eyed grass in your yard and you don't even know it, okay? And it's out in your lawn, but you don't know it because you're mowing it down, okay? But it only gets about 4 to 6 inches tall. It'll take it sun, shade, wet or dry, okay? It does like full sun. But it's it also sucks up toxins. So it'll take up excess nutrients and those type of things. But as far as a substitute for larapi or some other things like that right there, it's a great substitute. And then of course everybody knows black-eyed Susans. Again, look how open these flowers are. We'll go back to that. How these flowers are real open, easy to get to. And then lastly, let's not skip the asters. Boy, the asters, the last show before the frost. They're the last thing to come in. They look ratty all year long. And then that last 2 to 3 weeks, they come out and you just like, oh, I'm sure glad I left that. I'm glad I didn't mow that down, because my wife said, oh, it looks just so ratty. But, when the Georgia aster comes on, we're all like, yeah, that's when we leave it. And so just don't skip the asters or don't underappreciate those. And just some other great photos here of just our pollinators, and it's a bug's world. And here you can see this, it is really their world. We just bury it, and as you can see the Leatris here on the right, all the butterflies fighting over that up on the parkway. Again, just doing their job without any thanks. I then would have come back to this one shrub. I kind of had a little bit out of order, but I put it in there. This is one of my favorite shrubs. This is Blue Star, Amsonia. And this grows all over the mountain, over in Pickens and Glassy Mountain over there. You can see this beautiful flower. Look at that fall color. Just look at that blazing fall color, bordering a walkway. This plant is so versatile in your landscape because it looks like it looks like a herbaceous perennial, but it's actually a shrub. And so just really can't love this plant a lot. And you can see how all seasons in spring, summer, and fall, it provides a lot of things there. I want to talk a little bit about some non-natives that also serve our pollinators. So everything doesn't have to be native. There's a lot of good non-natives out there that work and do a lot of hard and heavy lifting for our pollinators. And that's one of those clover. Putting clover out in your lawn. You got clover in your lawn, you want to try to get rid of it, maybe live with it a little bit. And don't mow quite so often, so you let it go to flower so you can serve our pollinators. And so again, red clover, I was down in St. Matthews, Calhoun County a couple of years ago. They have a honey jubilee down there, and it's a big festival for about pollinators. I mean, the whole town comes out, they have a parade and everything, and they have just fields and fields of clover. And you can just hear the buzz. I mean, you just stop your car and just get out and you just hear the buzz. But clover is a really good one out there that's not native and does a good job for us. Here's a slide of mountain mint. This is a native, and beware about mountain mint. If you get one, you have lots because it will take over. And I planted 5, and now I'm taking out 80% of it. But mountain mint is one of our great pollinators. And it serves a long time out in the landscapes. Bees love coneflowers. You know, the purple coneflower, the white coneflower, all these guys out there. Again, why do they like them? Because there's a good nectar source and they're real open, they're easy to get to. And then the goldfinch come in and wipe out the seeds in the fall. So purple coneflower all the way around is a really, really good plant for you. And it has some medical value as well. And of course, our sunflowers, we see the big fields of sunflowers. And again, our bees, they love sunflowers. And bugs love Joe Pye weed. And I love Joe Pye weed. You know, I like to tell the story, and many of y'all probably heard before, but when my youngest son was born, I wanted to name him Joe Pye. And, you know, so my wife says, we're not naming our kids after plants. So we wound up naming him Drake, which is a male duck. So I'm not sure which is better. So, but anyway, I love Joe Pye weed. You know, there's some cultivars out there now called Little Joe that doesn't get quite 10 feet tall. But again, Joe Pye weed is a great plant for late summer and fall in your landscape. But you know, you see diversity. And you know, I mentioned right off the bat, would you know the biodiversity if you saw it? Could you touch it? Could you feel it? How times you walk through the woods and you walk by just wonderful ecosystem, and it's only maybe a foot wide, you know. But when you come to places, this is the Furman Lake restoration we did up there, or the shoreline meadow that we did. And that picture right there to me just kind of summarizes what biodiversity should look like, you know, in a natural setting. And again, when you go up there and you walk, when this thing is fully and geared up in the middle of summer, man, the birds out there and the insects are just phenomenal. And so it's again doing good things there. These open meadows, like here, you can see where you took what would have been mowed lawn and we converted it into meadow. And all this meadow, what is it doing? It's keeping that lake back there with drinking water clean. So it's serving ecosystem services by doing landscape ecology. And here another, what would have been, you know, just a huge mowed area, you know, we converted it to a meadow. This was over near Clemson University. This lady was in her 80s. She couldn't get out there and mow her grass anymore. She's like, I gotta do something. I said, let's put a meadow in it. And so she let us do it, you know, and there's what we wound up with. And she thanks us, and she's still going. She's 97 now. And so she still loves her meadow. And she can tell you every plant out there. And so that's how you do it. So when we think about all this, we think about what the principle of sustainable landscapes is and what it looks like. Sustainable landscapes have to function in harmony with natural processes and the environment. Again, using the plant communities as models. We have to create usable and enjoyable spaces for people. As a landscape designer for 30 years, you know, you work for people. They're the ones writing you a check. And you have to create spaces that they can use and they enjoy. It's not for you, it's for them. And but you do your job and you do it well, then you create wildlife habitat that has biodiversity in it, and you don't have to just really kind of oversell it, just do it. And so again, provide the food for wildlife and people, provide maintenance, low-term maintenance and costs. And then again, the paradigm shift that's represented in this type of landscape ecology. And it is a paradigm shift because when you look out there and 99% of our landscapes today are chemically frozen in time, you know, and with non-native plants. And so again, we have to change that paradigm. We have to flip it. And that's what we've been doing for 28 years in the Native Plant Society and my business. So here's a few examples of some residential landscapes where I say, you can have your biodiversity. You can have a well-kept landscape. It can look good. It can be year seasonal. So it doesn't look the same in the spring as it looks like in the summer. And it doesn't look like in the summer what it does in the fall. So you get this transition just like nature does. If it looks the same all the time, it's a failure. If it doesn't progress and change over time, 10 years, whatever, you have to plan for 10 years down the road. A lot of people design a landscape to put it in for right now. What about 10 years now? Okay, so you do these landscape design for the future. And so here you can see a couple of residential designs. One on the left there is Frank Holloman's place. I can say that. And then here's one that we did just a few years ago. This was an erosional ditch. And we took a ditch and we turned it into that. Again, you can see when you work into the shade areas, how you can create these woodland areas in here. And again, you have just a wonderful little walkway there where you've got these native plants in there that's providing services for the bugs Again, when you see these landscapes, you can see how diverse they actually are. And again, and so you can see, you can have a wonderful space and still have, servicing the wildlife and the pollinators. Again, another example of how you can control water, stormwater, create bog gardens, rain gardens in here, and then provide all these pollinator plants around it. So again, it's landscape, but it's actually ecosystem. And that's the way we got to think about it. It's not landscaping, it's ecosystems. And it's about ecosystem services is where we started off at in this program. And so you can see the Baptisia right there, how beautiful it is standing on its own. I wanted that plant to stand on its own, not mixed in with a bunch of 50 other things, because it deserves it. And, and then you can see the slide on the right where you got asters and gentians there beautifully together, and just like they should be. And again, you can have the most formal landscape in the world, and we've designed the most formal things you could ever think. But again, it's not how it looks, it's how it functions. Again, just again, small spaces, large spaces, in between spaces, rooftops, roof gardens. We've done most of all these. Again, with each and every one of the principles of sustainability have been applied, and they're all the same each and every time. And so I've been blessed to have a staff around me that believes in what we've been trying to do for the last 30 years. And again, you can see this was another erosional mess in here. You could put a Volkswagen in there with all the erosion that had washed all that whole bank into the lake, Lake Kiwi. But we put it back like this. And then we love these little connections like Leatris and black-eyed Susan and coneflower. That 3-plant combination will go anywhere in the world and still do well. So you can put those 3 plants anywhere, anytime, and they're going to go good. They're going to go good together. They're going to do exactly what we've been talking about. And again, just, look around. You can see. I don't need to tell you guys anything. You guys can look around just as much as I can. So here you can see this little skipper right there on that coneflower with the black-eyed Susans in the background. And again, it's just some more photos of just some projects that I've done. This landscape right here is about 25 years old. And I went by there last year and it still looks really, really good 25 years later. And so again, you create spaces for people, but you landscape for the bugs and the insects, because that they're going to bring in the other things that people want, like the beautiful birds. And so again, it's just it comes back to good design. This is the CU ICAR campus. Again, how do we convert lawns to meadows and prairies? And this was a mix. Somebody made a mess out of this, and Clemson ICAR hired us to come back in and fix it. And so what we put in here is a Piedmont prairie, and it's doing really, really well. And so we can convert corporate campuses into these scenarios as well. This is the ecology and public spaces, I call it. This is the Pickens County Museum over in Pickens. And you can see it in its glory over there on the east side. Again, plant community installation, plant community design, and serving the public through education. And so grateful for all the volunteers. And Judy Seeley here is one of those great volunteers that's helped carry that legacy on at the Pickens County Museum. And here's another shot of the Pickens County Museum. Native plants in public places doing public education. That's it. That is it. And that's been the mission, and it still is the mission. Because when we walk in some door of some place and this is what we see, rather than Carissa Holly's, or Larapi or something. We could be anywhere, but here we're in Pickens County. Everything we did in here is from Pickens County. So what can you do to participate in the circle of life in your ecosystem? Okay, and it is a circle of life. What we've covered in this program in an hour is a circle of life. And we're not separate from it, but we're part of it. This is what I come back to land ethics. We're not separate from nature, we're part of it. We're a biological citizen, just like everything else is. And when we start to think that way, we'll start to act that way. We understand our role, just as everything else in nature has a role. We have our role to play just as well, like setting up this wonderful little log right there with this nesting boxes and habitat for our bees, which I did with my grandson, which is really, really easy. And so completing that circle of life, bringing it on, teaching others, and sharing it across the spectrum. So lastly, this is a link to the Zero Seed Society. And so this link right here, anything you want to know about pollinators, was afraid to ask or didn't hear it tonight, I would direct you to the Zero Seed Society. They have posters, they have all sorts of literature that they will send you out there for this. And so you can be your own pollinator projector and a champion out there, and you'll learn so much from them. And I've interacted with them for over 20 years, and I just love everything that they do and all the publications and posters on. I mean, their posters are incredible, and they're free. And so heartbeat free. And but Zero Seed Society is a great link. I could have put 50 links up here, but I put one link because that one link will take you to all the other links. And so why worry about 50 links when you can have one link that takes you where you need to go? And but that's all I have for tonight. And so thank you for your patience, and thanks for having me tonight. So I've been very time.
So you think butterfly was, it was a milkweed that was for the monarch. So can you talk about the difference? That butterfly weed?
That's a butterfly. That was the butterfly weed. That was Asclepias tuberosa, which is one of our more common butterfly weeds. The butterfly bush is not native, and and it provides a lot of nectar, but it doesn't provide anything else beyond nectar. And but that's a great question. But with the Asclepias, and there's all sorts of many species of Asclepias. The one I showed, the one that was most common to our area, which is the tuberosa. And but there's a lot of different Asclepias out there, but not to be mistaken by the butterfly bush. And I'm starting to see the butterfly bush escape out into the wild. I've seen it coming up in some natural areas that it shouldn't be there, and I'm starting to see it over in Pickens County. And I've already alerted DNR about it, that I'm seeing this plant, and we're not ready to call plant Department of Plant Industry yet. People would shoot me if we got that plant off the market because people love it and I like it. But we just have to be aware of what's going on. Just a different name. Yeah. Yeah, milkweed is probably the better name to refer to it as milkweeds. And so it's a common name. But Asclepias is the genus for most of it. And so us native plant geeks, we like to speak Latin. And so Asclepias is kind of the way we like to think about it.
I'm surprised that the Amsonia is a shrub.
It is a shrub.
Yeah. Never gets a chance to be that.
Woody. It acts like a herbaceous, but it's listed as a shrub. And that's why I tried to preface that it acts like a perennial, herbaceous perennial, but it's actually listed as a shrub. I could be wrong on that, but I think I'm not. But there's two species of that. There's that Hubrectii, which is that little one I showed, was that golden color and that's real feathery like leaves. The other one is Tabor montania. It has a more of a leafy leaf to it. And we have both species up on, I think, Glacier Mountain in Pickens. But it can act like a herbaceous plant. And I've got them planted in my garden, and it takes about 3 to 4 years for them to get enough root mat to really start to harden off and make them more of a shrub. At least that's what I'm thinking. So, but we put it in people's landscapes, and it really behaves like a shrub. So, but they'll cut it down and let it start back over next year because they don't want it to get away from them as far as size goes.
What are some of the best native grasses you plant?
Good question. Great question. Well, I think again, all the grasses, particularly the little blue stem, Indian grass, are really good grasses. Plume grass is another one, has that big sprawly inflorescence in the fall. I think plume grass is a good for pollinators. Mini grass, little blue stem, split beard blue stem, all these have a little bit more inflorescence to get to than say something like it's just a straight broom sedge. But they all have some role, and sometimes we might not know that role.
Mostly wind pollinated.
Most of them are wind pollinated, but
There are butterflies.
there are some butterflies that feed on them. So they might not be quote a pollen source, or it might not be a nectar source, but they can serve as host plants or habitat cover, food cover, water kind of thing. So they can provide some cover. Good question though. Thank you. Well, there's a lot of good plants out there. Those vines I showed you, those long corollas, anything red, it has a red flower, cardinal flower, is a great hummingbird plant because of the red color. They really tend to gravitate toward more red colors. Coral honeysuckle, the vine I showed you, that's another good hummingbird plant. That summer sweet clethra, that penstemon I showed you, that beard tongue, that is a great plant for hummingbirds because again, it's got that long tube, for their proboscis to, get down there and get into it. But those are good. But, I've seen hummingbirds on things I wouldn't think they would be on, like impatiens or something like that as well. So I think, when push comes to shove, they'll get on anything. But those are a few good ones. Those vines I mentioned, that clethra, all the clethras are great. Buchanan calls it their flower source. Bottlebrush buckeye, is another one. I see the butterflies and the hummingbirds fight over bottlebrush buckeye every year, and I watch that battle going out all the time, over that. Joe pie weed, ironweed, they're also another good ones as well. But I didn't tend to like those things to have those red color because again, it's just going to be an instant magnet. And so I like putting vines on trellises so you can control those vines. And then you can put a bird bath next to it and you got the perfect habitat. Okay, good.
So native plants, what type of things can we do to increase the habitat for like overwintering? Like I saw you had the bee, box where you drill the holes in the log, but like aside from that, like what are other things to improve and increase overwintering?
Well, that's a good one thing is value your leaves. We always want to get rid of our leaves and just get rid of them, get rid of them. You can get rid of maybe 80% of your leaves, but leave a little bit of leaf litter, because when that ground is covered with a little bit of leaf litter, those insects and other things can hide underneath those leaves, have enough shelter in there to overwinter. Excuse me. So leaving a little bit of leaves, more management practices, I think, are good. So leaving some leaf litter in your areas, so again the critters can get underneath those leaves and have a habitat there. And then the other thing is, don't I think protecting your soil aeration, making sure your soil doesn't get too compacted because a lot of insects overwinter in the ground. If the ground is so compact, they can't get down in it, which is another good reason that you want to leave a little bit of leaf litter so your ground stays a little more loose and open at the top 6 to 8 inches, because a lot of things have to go back down into the soil over winter and then come back up. So keeping your soil there really good, keeping it open, letting some of that leaf litter kind of shelter it out there was really, really good. Reduce your fertilizers, or eliminate your fertilizers. Chemical-based fertilizers, that's what you go out here Lowe's and you buy. It's toxic. It is a toxin, and they make bombs out of it. So why are we putting it on our plants and flowers? And so it's an oil-based product. So why not use fungi? And this is what we do at my business. What I've practiced for 30 years is using fungi instead of fertilizers, and that works really good because again, what are you doing? You're completing that life cycle. It's a cycle. You're a part of that life cycle from the food web in the ground to above ground, and the food web that you can see and the food web that you can't see. When you take a little 2-inch cube of soil like this anywhere, I don't care, you go right out here, there's probably miles and miles of mycelium in that soil, fungi that's keeping that soil loose and open. And then how many other organisms, bacteria, nematodes, and other type of things in that soil that you can't see, but they're part of making your soil alive. When you put out chemicals and fertilizers, well, you taking all that out of the equation. And so, so there you're going backwards. And then you're creating a landscape that has to be dependent on those chemicals and those fertilizers to exist. So it's a good cultural practice to understand, how all this works. And again, that food web below and above ground is so important that we understand how that works. We don't have to see it to know that it works, and know that it works. And so, and your plants will thrive based on those conditions, because when you get compacted soils, nothing lives very well in compacted soils, and then what's our remedy for compacted soils? Tillers. Don't till. Do not till. Tilling destroys the soil. It destroys the food web. Nothing holds anything together, and all of it goes down into the Atlantic Ocean. So, you can't touch one thing in nature, not touching all of it. So, but these tillers, I used to argue with people who come to work for me, where's our tiller? We don't have one, we don't have one, and so again, so it's just a different way you have to think about what you're doing. I was attending a soil and water conference meeting up in Marietta last fall, educating farmers on about no-till farming. Of course, none of them wanted to hear it. They didn't want to hear about to put up their plow, and when they look at all the silt that's winding up in Saluda Lake from northern Greenville County, where's it all coming from? It's coming from their agricultural fields. And these farmers are losing 10, 15, 20 foot bank every year to erosion, and they want to know why. Well, this goes back to tilling, and so we did a great demonstration, soil and water, and NRCS did a great demonstration up there about why you don't need a till and how you can grow crops and get just as much yield without the chemicals and less chemicals, less fertilizer, still grow just as much crops, but without destroying the food web in the soil. I'm not. They feed on, yeah. Yeah. That's great. I hadn't heard of that product, but we use a product from a company called bio-plex.com. And they sell a product called 5-in-1. And in that 5-in-1, they have both endomycorrhizae and ectomycorrhizae. One's for woodies and one for herbaceous. But it's got both of them in, so you don't have to worry about, okay, is this only for trees and shrubs or this one? So it works on both. And it's Jesus in a bag. And it stuff is great. When I first started my business years ago, trying to use native plants and nobody knew what I was talking about, I knew because I taught soil science that I had to have the mycorrhizae, and so I'd go out and bribe farmers to could come in their hog pen and dig up their soil and take it off. What do you want that for? I said, well, because it's got bugs in it. It's got mycorrhizal bugs in it. And they said, what are you talking about, mycorrhizae? I said, I didn't know what I was talking about. But I'd go get their soil and I'd go to these grading companies and I'd buy their waste products. And they said, well, nobody wants this stuff. I said, I want it because I knew it had the mycorrhizae in it. And then I wouldn't be here without it. And but it's really kind of, again, you have to, when you think about all this, and my talk's been pretty broad here, when you think about all this stuff, it really makes sense. It makes a lot of sense, and it's not something that's experimental. It hasn't been done before. I've been doing it for a long time, and now the whole world's doing it. I mean, think about where this, I mean, a lot of folks have been in native plants as long as I have. Just think about where we were, where we are today. You know, and so, we've made a difference and we're still making a difference. And, and the landscape industry, you know, again, I say landscape industry is still broken, but we're working on it. And, supply and demand, and the demand's out there. And our plant sales are a great example of the demand for native plants. And, and then nurseries can't grow them and keep them fast enough. And, so it's really, really, good to see it come to where it's come, but we got a long way to go. And, so I'm looking forward to, you know, continuing to do what I do for the Plant Society and, what I do as a professional and advocate for certain things like this. And, to, you know, just kind of bring it all home because, you know, we got to plant it and save and native plants one backyard at a time. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody, for coming.
Yep. Thank you.
Whole day?
Hey, but it is myself. I'm Chuck Hubbock. I'm volunteering at the nursery,
Okay, great.
and, growing plants. I probably see it around again. I just moved up here a year ago and started getting involved.
Right,
few
right.
months
I need to get out there and get a little more involved. So Pam's kind of looking back into that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do too. And right, nice to meet you. And thanks for coming out and listening tonight.
Good night
So,
too.
yeah, so, I'm just a troublemaker.
Sounds like we need more. Good to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks for saving the day, Rick.
You're welcome. Okay, okay.
No, that was great. I always have lots of questions for people. but-
Little River Basin tomorrow, so,
Yeah.
yeah, but that's a big.
Like, what do you mean?
So what we meet monthly.
Say that again?
We meet monthly. There's
Oh,
20
meet monthly.
There's 25 people on the council at the River Basin.